Hey everybody, it's Dr. Bain again. I just wanted to make this video to help anyone that needs some clarification on ancient Egypt. And even if you've heard about it and read about it, this will be a good way for you to do a review. So, but before I go ahead and click further, I do want to do a copyright announcement. Should you want this presentation, please go to Teacher Pay Teachers, follow the instructions so that you can legally download your copy of this presentation. But it's interactive, your students are going to love it. It also comes with music, which I've turned off for this presentation. But I think you'll really enjoy it. So take some notes, sit back, and we'll get going. Okay, so some main things about ancient Egypt are strategically located. Okay, so the Nile River, which is possibly the main thing, and it really is the source of their wealth and survival of ancient Egypt, was such an integral part of their everyday. So in early ancient Egypt, the Nile River divided two separate countries. Okay, so it was Upper and Lower Egypt with their own kings. Around 3150 BC, so remember how I told y'all if you're looking on the timeline, when we say BC, that's in the negatives. Okay, during the first dynasty, Upper and Lower Egypt became unified into one country under King Menes. The delta was in Lower Egypt and the land upstream was Upper Egypt. The Nile flowed downward to Lower Egypt. Egypt had natural barriers. This is some of the key terms that you're going to hear that provided more protection from invaders and a greater sense of security. This is another reason why this was such a successful early civilization. Okay, not only did they have their own writing system, they also had natural barriers that protected them from other enemies. So this was unlike Mesopotamia, located on flat land, that placed them at risk for invasion. So that's where Egypt had that leg up. Okay, so Egypt was known as the two lands, Upper and Lower Egypt, and the villages were developed along the Nile River, which that kind of makes sense, right? Why you would want it on the Nile River. The river provides food, irrigation, okay, transportation, all those things. So here are some power words or vocabulary words that you're really going to be looking for. Mummification. What is a mummification? The process of preserving and drying a dead body to prevent from rotting. And this was a practice used by Egyptians. Mummies that are found today, many of them, you can actually see what they look like. They'll still have hair or skin still on that. So we do know the preservation of the mummies was a successful practice. Okay, what was a pharaoh, the highest ruler of ancient Egypt? He was godlike, or she, godlike. Okay, so we can say king, but the pharaohs were considered gods. So bureaucracy, the type of government during the Old Kingdom, we're going to talk about a timeline, consisted of an administrative organization with officials and procedures. So this isn't some primitive civilization. This is government, okay? And vizier is a person that is in charge of government bureaucracy. Here's some more. Chariots. You may see this on TV sometime. A horse-drawn carrier that the Egyptians used for war. They learned to use from the Hyksos. Hieroglyphs. What's a hieroglyph? A complex writing system that implemented pictures used by ancient Egypt. So those pictures represented what they were trying to say. So a dynasty, a family of rulers having the right to rule being passed down, sound like kings, right? And Giza, the city where the great pyramid is located? Hieratic script, a simplified version of hieroglyphics. The scriber used dashes and strokes to represent the picture in hieroglyphics. So this was kind of shorthand version. So we're going to talk about the Old Kingdom. So Egypt's divided into 3 kingdoms. We're talking about the Old Kingdom. So 2686 to 2181 BC, when they were built by when they built the famous pyramids. So this was really Egypt's first dynasty, was during this time. The Middle Kingdom, let's see when that was. 2025 to 1782 BC. A new royal dynasty gained control. It was a period of expansion and stability. The pharaohs played a new role in the Middle Kingdom. Instead of an almighty and distant ruler, now a provider and leader. So they're changing that political standpoint. And then the New Kingdom, okay? So it lasted around 100 years, and a new dynasty came and defeated Hyksos with their new weapons. So the New Kingdom was established 1567 to 1085 BC, time of expansion and rich art and architecture, kind of like their Renaissance period. So there's the Blacklands, fertile lands near the Nile River. Villages developed along the river so they could farm. This is going to be tested on. The Redlands were on both sides of the Nile. They were uninhabited hot deserts. Upper Egypt, so we're talking about regionally, the south region of Egypt, the land was drier and more mountainous. And Lower Egypt, northern part of Egypt, where the delta flows into the Mediterranean Sea, this area was more fertile. And Ka, the Egyptians believed that each soul had 2 bodies, a spiritual one and a physical one. Ka is the spiritual body. Okay, so here's the societal structure of ancient Egypt. So you have the pharaohs up top, priests and nobles. If you're comparing that to Mesoamerica, you're going to see similar hierarchies. Scribes, people that could read and write, the educated, the academics, if you will. Merchants and craftspeople, and then peasants and servants. So this is very similar to Mesoamerica. As civilizations came about, you're going to see those fundamental characteristics are very similar. So even though this was on the other side of the world, it really did have an impact to be successful. The upper hierarchy, especially scribes, because their job involves attending a special school to learn how to write and read hieroglyphs and hieratic script. So in order to be this, you have to have a high level of education. So these would have been the most educated people. All right, so let's just talk briefly about some of the pharaohs and rulers. Okay. I'm not going to go through each one of them, but some that you may recognize: Tutankhamun, even though he really didn't rule that long, little is known about his reign, but we know a lot about him because his tomb was found. So Ramses II, his queen was Nefertiti, and he was the most powerful pharaoh. In fact, Ramses had red hair, so just tell that Greek heritage with them as well. Okay. Hatshepsut was to be the first woman to become a pharaoh. She was a very successful pharaoh, and Egypt prospered during her reign. And she was obviously the daughter of a pharaoh. Thutmose first. The three different kingdoms. The Old Kingdom we talked about, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. So this is just reiterating that. Okay. So here's a little more in the timeline. 3100 BC. Okay. Menes reigned during this time and united Upper and Lower Egypt. 3000 BC, hieroglyphics emerged around 3000 BC. 2886, the Old Kingdom began and lasted until 2181 BC. And then 2600 BC, the construction of the pyramids during the Old Kingdom. And pyramids of Giza are probably one of the most famous pictures you'll see about Egypt. You may relate to it. They are one of the wonders of the world today. All right, 2025 BC, the Middle Kingdom began and lasted until 1782. So we're getting closer, but it's still kind of a long ways away. Okay. The Middle Kingdom ended, and then Hyksos invaded Egypt with their war chariots, and they ruled for about 100 years. 1539 BC, the New Kingdom began and lasted approximately until 1070. Okay. And then Hatshepsut reigned during the New Kingdom. Okay, so the pyramids of Giza in the background, that's an actual photo of it. So the pyramids contained tombs for the pharaohs who passed away. They believed in preserving the body in the afterlife. And you may hear a lot of theories about what these were, but we know that these were tombs, kind of a large tomb. So what else they did, we're not quite sure. And Ka is the spiritual body of a human being. It lives beyond death into the afterlife. That was another reason for mummification. Okay. And many pharaohs were buried with gold, some of them their wives, chariots, horses, because they felt like you could take that to the next life with you. Okay, so a little bit about mummification. So it's a process that Egyptians practiced to prevent dead bodies from rotting. They believed in the afterlife and in Ka, that spiritual part. They believed in the physical body needed to be preserved so Ka could return even after death. So the liver, lungs, stomach, brain, and intestines are removed from the body. They're placed in special jars inside the tomb. The body is covered in salt, and salt was a very precious item back then for preserving meat, so it makes sense that they would use that to help remove all water from the body to help preservation. Then they wrap the body from head to toe. Between the layers of wrapping, amulets are placed to protect the body during its journey to the afterlife. A priest also reads prayers out loud during the wrapping process to ward off evil spirits during its journey. A mask is placed over the head, body, and shoulders. The entire process takes about 70 days. The mummy is sealed in a case and placed inside a tomb in the pyramid. So, I mean, it's a commitment when this occurs. Possessions and food were also placed inside the tomb next to the body. If you were being prepared for the afterlife, what possessions would you ask to be placed next to you? So think about it. What would you want? Like I said, some of these pharaohs wanted they wanted their wives to come with them. So we know that was something that might have occurred. Okay. So what did the Egyptians learn from the Hyksos? So the use of war chariots. They learned to use bronze while making weapons and tools for farming, and they mastered military skills. Hatshepsut was the very first woman pharaoh. She was the daughter of King Thutmose I. Hatshepsut ruled under the new kingdom. It was a time of expansion and prosperity, and she was a powerful female ruler, so she did a lot of great things for Egypt during that time. Okay, so why are hieroglyphs so important? Okay, and what do you need? So you may have heard of the Rosetta Stone. This could be asked in a question. So what the Rosetta Stone basically did was that it translated 3 different languages. So one of them including hieroglyphs. So he was able to learn what hieroglyphs meant because he knew the other languages. And this led to the understanding of hieroglyphs because that was considered a dead language. Okay. We talked about hieroglyphs a little bit before, but just to reiterate, they're a form of writing used by the ancient Egyptians. They're pictures that represent things, ideas, sounds, and this type of writing led to other cultures using similar types of writing. Okay, and we talked about those scribes, those educated, those academics that were so important in their society. So scribes were in charge of recording everyday life and the special events in ancient Egypt. This was their job to record. Okay, and we know that the hieratic script is shorthand version of hieroglyphs, and the tools used in hieroglyphs were chisels and hammers. They used this on stone tablets or walls. They used brushes for wood or papyrus. So, I mean, these were very important, and the fact that they had a written language is another characteristic of a, uh, a successful civilization. So I know that's not everything that you learn about it, but if you're interested, these are the highlights. This is going to help you on your test. Just make sure that you remember that the Nile River was so important and what that did. So refer back to the beginning of the presentation. Also that they had a written language, hieroglyphs, and just the kind of that average time period that they existed. So good luck and let me know if you have any other questions.